All those in attendance, thank you. Those attending virtually and in person, really appreciate the time you've taken to attend. I'd like to thank members of our management team who are also here tonight. Thank you for your attendance and the work that's gone into this evening's agenda, which is quite considerable, which I think isn't very much an understatement given the amount of documentation and reports that have been provided to councillors. So again, thank you for that. I should advise that the meeting's been recorded and will be available on our website tomorrow or thereabouts as per norm. So apart from that, I think we can move into the agenda. The first item on our agenda is the apologies or leave of absence. We have an apology from Councillor Gary Sims. Do we have a motion to grant Councillor Sims an apology, please? We'll take mover Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Wicks. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item 2 is the declarations of a pecuniary and or conflict of interest under the Local Government Act provisions 1993. I'm hoping that each of you who have a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest have notified the GM and filled in the appropriate documentation. I will note for the meeting that we've received, I think, 2 notifications, one relating to 2 planning items and the other to a planning item and an item in closed session. They've come in from Councillor Baldock and Councillor Mead. Those 2 councillors will exit the meeting at the appropriate time to ensure that they're not conflicted and they abide by the guidelines associated with that particular section of the Local Government Act. Next is the confirmation of minutes from the ordinary meeting held on the 16th of December 2024. With a recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting be taken as read and confirmed. Somebody to move a motion, please.
So moved.
Councillor Fiddler, thank you. Councillor Metzger, as seconder. Any comment, Councillor Fiddler?
No comment. Drawn correct record.
Thank you. Councillor Metzger. Any discussion required around the accuracy of those minutes, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next item, I'm open to stand corrected if need be. I believe is item number 8, public participation, questions on those from the public, where we have received questions and we have provided a response. Those the questions and answers are provided for your information. The recommendation to councillors is that the questions on those be received from James Redgrave, I should say, endorse the responses proposed and authorise their release. A motion to that effect, please. Councillor Wicks and Councillor Fiddler. No discussion, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 9, public participation, questions without notice from the public, whereby there's an opportunity at each ordinary meeting for members of the public to ask questions of council in relation to council activities. We have 15 minutes set aside for that particular component of our meeting, but we can extend that should councillors wish to by way of a motion. There are, of course, conditions that apply to this component of the meeting. Some of those are very much detailed in our guidelines. If the question is unlawful in any way, for example, contains defamatory remarks, is offensive or improper language, is vague in nature or irrelevant to council activities. And again, as I say, they're listed there for public understanding. So, having said all that, is there anybody within the public gallery who would like to ask a question of council in relation to council activities? Please step forward, a name and the matter on which you wish to address council, please.
Dear councillors, my name is Natalie Cornish. I've contacted the council on numerous occasions about the noise pollution from the Speedway, and today I emailed everybody some things that I've been researching about the legislation for motorway noise in the rest of Australia. I've emailed the legislation from Western Australia, Queensland and Australian Capital Territory, all of which state that the Speedway has to finish by 10 p.m. sharp. It can operate between midday and 10 p.m. for a maximum of 5 hours in Western Australia and a maximum of 6 hours in the ACT and Queensland. It can only operate on a Friday and Saturday night and only have 2 consecutive days once in a season. So it can't have Friday, Saturday, multiple weekends. It can operate on a Sunday if the Monday's a public holiday. I live relatively close to the Speedway. I'm very negatively affected by the noise. It's very difficult to sleep. I work Monday to Friday, which is lucky for me. I have the weekend to recover from work, but I can't when the Speedway's on, and it affects me into the next week. I have a lot of neighbours who are also affected but don't want to publicly complain because they know people involved in the Speedway and they don't want to have a bad relationship with them. So I'm asking the council to look at the legislation for the rest of Australia, which is to finish by 10 p.m. And presumably that legislation's been made because the noise pollution is something that affects people, and that's why they've limited it to 10 p.m. And I would like to ask the council to bring the finishing time of the Speedway in line with the rest of Australia. We don't have legislation in Tasmania. It's the only state without legislation. I'll also be writing to the government to hopefully bring that into legislation, which would make it easier for the council to make that decision and not upset anybody, because I understand that you have relationships, possibly you have, a relationship with the Speedway and what happens in Latrobe, but I would really like the council to consider that the Speedway be finished by 10 p.m. in line with the rest of Australia, because as I said, there's a reason that it finishes like that. I have been asked by the Environmental Health Officer to ask my neighbours to write complaints. Most of them won't because, as I said, they have relationships with people. 2, I managed to meet on the weekend, said that they will call the council. I don't know if they have yet or not. One's a shift worker who lives in Maxwell Drive, very close to the Speedway. And the other one, his main concern is the loudspeaker, which he says is louder than the cars, to commentate over the top of them. And if the cars have a limit of 95 decibels and the commentator is over the top of that, that's very, very loud. So if you haven't received calls from them yet, they will be calling. And the people I haven't been able to catch up with over the weekend because it was a long weekend, hopefully they will also call in to let the council know that it's not just me. I didn't do all this research for the sake of complaining. It affects me negatively.
Now, I'd like to say, firstly, thank you. It's not easy stepping up to raise those concerns in a public forum, so thank you very much. Secondly, I'd like to say I very much understand the impact that deprivation of sleep can have on people, and I know firsthand and from some family experience around that. I'd also say to you that we need to consider clearly and in some detail the letter you sent today. Not only do we have the reference to the state government is absolutely appropriate. We are guided and restrained or restricted, whatever, by the state government applicable guidelines and laws. And your suggestion that you are going to write to them would be most appropriate, particularly local members. I speak specifically of Felix Ellis and the Premier, who both live in our municipality, our Sassafras. But again, I'd encourage you to do that. But as you say, it's not a simple issue. It's complicated. There's all sorts of considerations for those involved in Speedway and the like. So we'll take the question on notice, but we will provide a detailed response to the concerns you've raised. But most of all, I want to say thank you for your courage in coming forward and raising concerns which other people won't necessarily do, and I understand why. We are a close community and we all have relationships. But yes, thank you.
I have animals to look after, so I might not be able to stay if there's a discussion about it, but I'll listen to the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the public gallery who would like to address council on any questions? James, if you're the only one, it seems, left, come forward, name and the questions or topics you wish to have.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. James Redgrave, Shearwater. My first question, the item in tonight's agenda 14.1, Poyston Creek Shearwater Catchment Stage 2 report, page 264, being done by Hydrodynamica. Can we have what is either the estimated or the total cost of this report to council and the ratepayers?
Second question, right?
Thank you. Second question. It's clear from the hydrodynamical reports and council comments that ratepayers are being asked to pay for these on behalf of the Jock Road development off Burgess Drive. The last major development at Hawley saw this developer and council state that on the record they didn't ask the developer to contribute to the upgrading of infrastructure, which still to this day has stormwater issues being addressed at ratepayer cost. It's more than clear when you read the hydrodynamical report and the DA have more than just collaborated. They use both sets of data and testing to come to conclusions. Council states it will spend over $1 million to assist with a 600 metre length of stormwater upgrades, which will be paid by the ratepayers and for the benefit of this developer. How much has council asked for from the developer to contribute to the upgrading of infrastructure related to this development, other than just laying the pipes? Ratepayers have paid for, including how much towards the hydrodynamical report, which is clearly commissioned to benefit this developer by council.
Thank you for both questions. Unfortunately for me, the questions and answers in public question time are not to be debated, because there are some components of your questions I'd like to challenge. But having said that, I need to abide by the local government meeting procedures, and I will. So the answers to the questions are as follows. Question 1, the total cost for Hydrodynamica to undertake the modelling and prepare the report was $19,780, and which also included some third-party mapping work to support the project. The project required the use of sophisticated software and a level of expertise unable to be undertaken by council officers. Note, this commissioning also included liaising with the Jock Road engineers and assessing their work on behalf of the council. That assessment will form part of the information provided to councillors tonight. Response to the second question, and happy to provide these in writing to you, if Tanya would make that note. Council's consultant was requested to liaise with and review the developer's engineers' work to ensure appropriate design elements were considered throughout the process of scoping up the proposed subdivision. The proposed development does not increase the peak rate of runoff over the existing overland flow path through the One Care site as created by the topography and landfall. As such, the potential extension of larger pipework beyond the overland flow path is considered a discretionary project and has a similar merit irrespective of the Jock Road development proceeding. End of question. So we'll provide those responses to you in writing. Again, thank you for raising those concerns. Is there anybody else wishes to address council on any matter? If not, I'll thank both parties for their presentations, and we'll move on to item number 10, whereby in accordance with clause 25(1) of the Local Government Meeting Procedures and Regulations 2015, the chairperson must advise that council will now act as a planning authority. And in doing so, we will consider 2 development applications. I think it's appropriate before we deal with the first one, which is Shearwater Boulevard, that I inform the meeting that the second development application, that is the one at Burgess Drive or off Burgess Drive, will not be heard and considered tonight. I know some people would have come along to specifically listen to the debate around that one. I apologise for that, but just before the meeting started, I was advised that the General Manager has been in contact with the developer, and the developer has agreed to grant council an additional month in which to consider the application and the detail provided to councillors. It is a very, very complex development application. It has taken a power of work from our council staff and consultants to put the DA report together. I apologise to the council staff who worked long hours to get it ready for this meeting. But again, I think it's in the best interest of all those concerned that we take that additional month to consider the report that's been provided to us, and that agenda item will be included in the February meeting. We'll deal with the first one, that is the development at 81 Shearwater Boulevard. Then we'll require a motion to defer the second one as I've just outlined. So in relation to 10.9, which is development application at 81 Shearwater Boulevard, Shearwater, we have a conflict of interest declaration, and Deputy Mayor Mead is leaving the room. Note that for the record. I will now consider that application. The report author is Caleb Borg, our Statutory Planning Officer. Again, detailed as always. The report is there for us to consider, as is the recommendation, quite detailed as well. The recommendation in brief is that the report by the Statutory Planning Officer concerning development application at 81 Shearwater Boulevard, Shearwater, be received and that Council approve the proposed development at 81 Shearwater Boulevard, Shearwater, subject to the following conditions. And they are listed for Councillors' information and consideration. They relate to endorsed plans, residential storage, approved use, management plan, parking, environmental usage, food service, and that's the key headings for the conditioning. We have a council prepared to move a motion in keeping with the recommendation. Councillor Metzger, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Martin, thank you. Councillor Metzger, are you happy to hand over to our statutory planner, Caleb Borg, to present? Hold it. Caleb, if that's the case, we're in your hands. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Your report, and thank you for the work you've put into the report provided to councillors.
I'm just sharing the screen now. So good afternoon. We've got an application, as the Mayor said, for a change of use at 81 Shearwater Boulevard. That's all right, I'll just go from there. So we have an application for a change of use at 81 Shearwater Boulevard. In the initial application, they advertised for 12 people to stay in the two-storey dwelling. So you've got your first ground floor plan there, and you have got your first floor plan there. Given that it is a two-storey dwelling, it does have quite a high gross floor area, which is why it was discretionary. So I believe it was 255 square meters or somewhere around that area. So because of that, it was discretionary. So as part of the advertising, one representation was received, which the main concerns are as follows. I believe each of the councillors was given a copy of that representation prior to the meeting. So the main concern in regard to that was the noise and just generally the impact on the residential amenity of the development, or of the use, sorry. So the conditions that I've recommended is to reduce the number of that pen, which is 2 people per bedroom, if the craft room on the first floor is to be used as a bedroom. In regards to privacy impacts and so forth, if you're looking and comparing it to a residential use, there's not really that many increased impacts associated with the use. Most of the windows are relatively far from the adjoining properties, except for the southern window, I believe, which was about 3 meters from that boundary. However, that doesn't directly look over the private open space associated with that property. It appears to be more of a walkway with an al fresco located further down. The other impacts concerns with noise, which is controlled through our environmental health officers in regards to speakers and so forth. And I do believe that Airbnbs regulate that as well. And I've also recommended that a management plan to be included on that to the satisfaction of Jan, sorry. And that also be advertised online and on a wall within the building itself, so people are aware of the house rules with that one as well. And yeah, was there any comments on the application?
Councillor Metzger first, if we could, please.
I just had a question about the parking. I know that didn't trigger discretion because from the amount of people that are particularly staying there, so 10 people, there was only, they only required 2 parks.
Yep.
Is that right? So how's that calculated? Because I'm kind of like 10 people, only.
Yeah, so I have.
It's just going to fit in 2 cars if everyone
Yeah.
stays together.
So I haven't included the calculation in there. But yeah, that's just what it is under the Tasmanian planning scheme to meet that visitor accommodation requirement. Probably should have included what that calculation is within the table. But what is there is the requirement. So because it is a 5-bedroom, they only do require 2 parking spaces, which would probably be the case for most sort of visitor accommodations and is pretty standard for dwellings as well in terms of the parking amount.
I'm rapidly trying to find that, but
I know, Richard.
I'm confident it was in the report.
1 space per self-contained accommodation unit, or 1 space per 4 beds, whichever is the greater.
Yep.
So if you've got 4, so if we're sleeping 10 people, that's 10 beds, so that'd be 2.5 spaces. So do we round down or do we round up?
You round up.
So they need 3 spaces then?
It's 1 space per 4 beds. So they have 5 bedrooms, so it would go up to 2.
So 5 bedrooms, not beds.
Oh, well, beds, yeah. If you're assuming there's 1 bedroom, 1 bed per bedroom, that is.
Yeah. So if we're giving a permit to sleep 10 people,
Mm-hmm.
that would be 10 beds.
Not necessarily double beds.
Yeah, I know, but it could be. It could be.
Yeah, I get it. It's a bit of conjecture.
Yeah.
Yes.
I suppose my main concern was this, and looking at the site too, there doesn't really seem to be any space for additional parking. Like there's only just space for 2, just because of all the garden and stuff as well. Unless you took out the garden. Unless you took out the trees.
Caleb, you assess these on the standard you have to apply. The problem for me as a councillor is when we get an application for a unit, we get 2 car spaces plus visitor parking, and these are completely different, but we know the numbers are going to be similar to a 4-unit development. The parking requirements are so extremely different.
Yeah.
And that street is quite a busy street. It's a thoroughfare. It's a key linking through to Hawley, but you can only assess it the way you've assessed it. It's just an issue we're concerned about as councillors. But again, you provide the report, the detail required. So.
And I guess it's the case of any sort of even residential uses, you may have an overflow of parks anyway. But yeah, I guess in this case, we just have to assess what's against the planning scheme. So it calls for 2 parking spaces, which the driveway can accommodate for. That condition was more included just to alleviate any sort of potential concerns of people parking on other people's sort of lawns, that sort of thing, which can be a concern in the area, especially with the streets and that sort of thing. So
Yeah. I suppose my concern is just if there's 10 people staying there, likely there's going to be more than 2 cars.
Yeah, which off the top of my head, I don't know the measurement to that driveway, but you might be able to park behind the other cars that are on site as well. So
I guess it is where it is. Jan, just again from recollection, I remember reading that there was reference to what I thought was a street, but it was written as a site or adjoining nature strip in terms of not allowing parking on adjoining sites and nature strips. I think there's a wording issue in the report in relation to that, which needs to be addressed or noted and reflected in the conditions should that be approved, just for noting. Again, I'm going from memory, but I'm pretty confident that's the case. Any other questions, Councillor Metzger?
No, that's all.
Councillor Martin?
Can I just ask, is the 10 guests, is it a combination of adults and children, or is there a provision for 10 adults? What's that breakdown, or there isn't one?
so the way that the wording is on that, it would be 10 people total. It just specifies guests, so that would include children as well as adults.
It could be 10 adults at a bucks party.
Yeah, which, bucks parties and that sort of thing, that would be regulated under sort of like the environmental health officer condition regarding noise and amplifiers and that sort of thing. In terms of parties, I know that is regulated through Airbnb. I would like to think that most of the time the people who are hosting these houses are cautious in regards to throwing events at their property and the damage that might, occur in regards to those parties and that sort of thing.
Again, reputation is everything with Airbnb, we're told. And, Airbnb apparently manage complaints, but I understand the concerns that are being raised because we've had them raised in other circumstances. Questions from councillors around the table? No? If that's the case, then I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That will be 7 in support, 1 against, the one against being noted as Councillor Metzger. Thank you. And again, thank you, Caleb, for the work you've put into that, and really appreciate your presentation. As I said earlier in the meeting, the second item to be considered under the Planning Authority agenda was to be a subdivision of 75 lots off Burgess Drive. No, you don't need to. No, because we're not going to consider it. And Vanette's saying out of this one as well.
But then I should go too.
True, she can come back in if that's the case. If you would ask for Vanette, thank you for that. One's in, both win. Unusual circumstances, but thank you for straightening that up. I don't see any conflict of interest in deferring it. Yeah. Sorry? So as I said earlier, in discussions with the general manager, the developer of the subdivision at of Burgess Drive has agreed to defer the application being considered by the Planning Authority until February. Can we have a motion that that item be deferred until February meeting, please? Councillor Metzger, are you happy to move that?
Yep.
Tanya, you can capture if you would. Thank you. A seconder. Councillor Martin, thank you. Is there any need for discussion, apart from expressing our gratitude to the developer and to the general manager for the work they've done? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Can I just point out I probably shouldn't have been back in the room yet?
Oh, no. Well, discuss that with the general manager, cleared it.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
okay.
so I'm not involved.
No.
Yes, thank you.
No, you're not in conflict when we're only deferring the motion.
Right. Okay.
Is the general manager's view?
Mm-hmm. So are they voting now?
So, all those in favour?
He's second vote on third.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, let's be clear. All those in favour?
I'd still vote.
Those against? And we'll take one abstention.
Two.
Yeah. Happy to abstain from voting. Happy to record that. So 6 in favour, 2 abstain from voting. Those 2 being Councillor Baldock, I'll get it right in a minute, and Deputy Mayor Mead. Coming flustered for no reason. Having said that, we need to go to the next item on the agenda, which should be that council cease to act as a planning authority. We have a mover and seconder, Councillor Fiddler, thank you. And Councillor Metzger, got it right, I hope. Thank you. All those in favour? And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is, if I'm not mistaken, 11.1, which is from the Development and Regulatory Services Department and relates to the naming of a new road created by a subdivision of Torquay Road, Latrobe. The report author was Troy McCarthy. The details being provided to councillors. There's a recommendation associated with the report. That recommendation, if I get it right, is that the report by Planning Officer concerning naming of new roads created by subdivision at Torquay Road, Latrobe, be received, and council name the new road off Torquay Road, Hedges Court. We have a mover and seconder, Councillor Wicks and Deputy Mayor Mead. Thank you. Councillor Wicks.
I'd like to say I don't know what's in the report, but I support the naming of that.
Thank you.
Ambiguity with spelling or the like, so it's quite a simple name.
Deputy Mayor Mead? Happy to support. Questions or queries? Comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you for that. 11.2 is the Building Department report for December 2024, prepared by our Manager of Development and Regulatory Services, Jan Phoebe. The report is accompanied by a recommendation, that is that the report advising of building and plumbing applications and notifications received for the month of December be received. We don't have Councillor Sims with us tonight to move this motion, so I'll ask if another councillor would be prepared to move the motion as per the recommendation, please. Councillor Metzger, thank you, and Councillor Fiddler. Any discussion? Councillor Metzger. What would Councillor Sims have said? No?
I'd say, oh, it's a little bit of a downturn, but improve in the coming months. It's usually quite like Christmas.
Thank you. Councillor Fiddler.
What was it, Councillor Metzger?
Okay.
Right over Christmas, so things should be going up.
Any questions, queries, concerns, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Likewise, we have a report from the Manager of Development and Regulatory Services relating to the Planning Application Status Report 2024. Recommendation again that the report be received. Mover and seconder, if we could, please. Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Martin, thank you. Any discussion?
No, nothing there, it's all in the report, so.
Forward. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Item 12.1 comes from the Office of the General Manager, a report by Cameron Parsons, the Manager of Corporate and Business Services. It's the Latrobe Council Annual Plan Quarter 2 Progress Update, October to December 2024. And the recommendation is that report by the Manager of Corporate and Business Services be received and that Council receive and note the report I should read word for word. Council receive and note the 2024-25 Latrobe Council Annual Plan Quarter 2 Progress Update for the quarter October to December. Simple, straightforward recommendation. Do we have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Metzger. As the mover, seconder is Councillor Martin. Councillor Metzger, any comment?
Are we having a presentation or are we just anything? Oh, I don't know. What's prepared? Anything? No?
The report was provided for your information.
Yep.
So happy?
Yep.
Okay. But happy to take any queries or questions. I'm sure Cameron is open to that. No? Councillors happy, confident? Appreciate the report as always. Can we do? Seriously? Yeah. Keeps us up to speed. Having said that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next is from the Corporate and Business Services Department, the Finance Report for 2024. It's been authored by Josh Jackson, the Acting Team Leader for Finance. The recommendation is that the report be received, being very clear, be received. Do we have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Fiddler, thank you, and Councillor Wicks. Councillor Fiddler, queries, questions, comments?
All in the report.
Straightforward. Councillor Wicks, happy? Queries or questions around the table? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you and the team, Cameron, for that. If you would pass our thanks to Josh and Andrew. Next is 13.2, the council allowances and expenses for the quarter ended December 2024. Again, report authored by Josh Jackson. Again, a recommendation. I'll turn my page. That the report by the Acting Team Leader Finance concerning council allowances and expenses for the quarter ended December 2024 be received. A mover and a seconder in line with that recommendation, if possible, please. Councillor Brown I've got, and Councillor Metzger as the seconder. Councillor Brown, straightforward, clearly about transparency and openness and reporting. Councillor Metzger?
Is what it is.
Exactly. Any questions, comments, queries? No? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. 14, agenda item 14, specifically 14.1, comes from the Infrastructure and Assets Department. 14.1 is the Poyston Creek Shearwater Catchment Stormwater Report, Stage 2. The report is authored by the manager of that area, Jonathan Magor. Quite detailed, Jonathan. Thank you for the work you and your team and your consultants have done on our behalf. Always appreciated. Is there a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? That is that the report by the manager infrastructure and assets concerning Mersey leaving emergency management plan. No. If I get the right recommendation, it might be helpful. The recommendation, correct recommendation, is that the report by the manager infrastructure assets concerning Poyston Creek Shearwater Catchment Stormwater Report Stage 2 be received, and 1. Council receives and makes available to the public a final version of the presented draft Stage 2 hydrodynamic report for the Poyston Creek catchment, but including a minor wording clarification within the second paragraph of the conclusion. And 2, council officers initiate progressing the 2025 recommendations as outlined with the proposal summary section of this report. And 3, subject to recommendation 2, the council considers actioning the identified items in line with the proposed summary section of this report and being subject to change as opportunities present, circumstances change and or priorities alter. Do we have a mover and a seconder to in line with the recommendation? Councillor Metzger, thank you for that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fiedler, thank you. Councillor Metzger.
I will throw to Jono to present.
If you'd like to give us a brief overview, particularly for those watching in and present. Jonathan, if you would, who don't necessarily have access to the report.
Thank you. This report here is a second stage report. So the initial report was about the catchment in close proximity to the currently proposed development within it. This catchment is, the Poyston Creek catchment is quite a bit bigger than that development that has currently been proposed, in that it's only about 2% of that total catchment area. But nevertheless, it's important to ensure that what we're receiving from proponents of the subdivision align with what council sees as acceptable and appropriate criteria for that development, and are able to independently, I suppose, assess and make decisions about development within that catchment. So whilst there's been some collaboration between the developers, engineers and the hydrodynamic consultant who's prepared this report for council, what that effectively does is ensures that rather than get to a point where there's two conflicting reports, that there's two people actually working in parallel but not on the same modelling software. So there's two different types of software, and they've effectively come to the same conclusions, which is important. And yeah, so this report relates not only to that smaller area that was addressed within the stage 1 report from hydrodynamics, but also looks at the greater catchment area and what potentially council can consider into the future regarding that lower catchment area. So down around the Pitcairn Street area and the golf course area and the outfall to Freers Beach. So it's been a lot of I suppose, suggestions that development within that area keeps making the situation worse and worse exponentially in the lower area. My reading and I hope it's clear within this report that area is going to be problematic irrespective of current development and future development. and certainly as if sea level rise is predicted to be correct. But yeah, we've got quite an uphill battle over the next 60 years to ensure that those areas can be usable to the community as they have done in the past, in particular the golf course. So you can see some recommendations in there with basically about the golf course. They also confirm some of the work that's been done in collaboration with 60 Degrees, which is a consultant for the developer, but it also talks about other things within that catchment, which is the diversion potential, other options for detention storage in the area. We looked at whether putting the original Poyston Creek, or the current Poyston Creek outfall back into its original alignment, which is out through Anderson Street, and had any merit. But yeah, it's a longer, more arduous path, and yeah, it basically doesn't stack up. So I think, yeah, there's half a dozen recommendations within the report. I've then worked on those with Cameron from Hydro and Amica in terms of what might be an appropriate time frame and approximate cost to achieve those. So within the report, within my report to council, there's the italic section, which is the recommendations or the from Hydro and Amica, and then in the normal font, the normal text is my suggestions to them, and then those are reflected in the recommendation, which talks about considering it in the 2025 budget and initiating conversations with, or continuing conversations with golf course and One Care and other main players associated with that catchment. Yeah, I don't know if I'll stop and start with this. I could go all night, but yeah, so the report hasn't changed since council saw it at a forum and had some discussion there, but yeah, happy to try to elaborate on anything that might be going to.
So, Councillor Metzger. Queries, questions, comments?
Oh, look, it's just, you know, a little disheartening to know that there isn't a lot we can do to alleviate this. Like, we had some good ideas, but yeah, but also they're probably not going to make any significant changes, which, you know, when you weigh up the cost of doing it and how much change is going to have, you know, can't really justify it, I suppose. I mean, the concern is with the report around the subdivision, the Jack development, I suppose, is that, you know, anything that's done upstream is, you know, it's not going to, you know, we aren't going to be able to tell it. These flooding issues are going to increase irrespective of what happens upstream. And there's no way that we're going to actually be able to tell, well, is it to do with climate change? Is it to do with sea level
development, whatever?
Yeah. But, you know, it's always easy to point the finger at the thing that's changed most quickly and most recently, I suppose.
And is most obvious in terms of the visual impact.
Yep.
I understand.
Yeah, it's just, it's a shame.
Jonathan, you want to respond?
Just clarify. So the detention basin, which is proposed in a lot of those subdivisions these days, is just pretty much standard practice in problematic catchment areas. So that will actually reduce the peak rate of flow. So how many litres per second or cubic metres per second or whatever, it will actually cap on the amount of flow that's coming out compared to what's existing. But what also happens, it's not only the peak flow rate that we're considering in terms of that lower area, it's actually volume of as well. So whilst the peak is reduced, it's actually dragged out over a longer period of time, and the volume of runoff increases with the amount of impervious area, the hard stands, you know, the roofed areas, the concrete driveways, the roads and all the rest of it. So a lot of instances where it goes into a watercourse, a river, a creek or whatever it is, once that, you know, it's that peak flow that's the concern, because once it's out in there, it gets ultimately into the ocean or the estuary or whatever it is. But in this instance, we've got that sort of basically a bowl at the bottom end of that catchment area, and which sending that water in there when there's a high tide or a blockage in that pipe it's not only the peak through our infrastructure upstream of that, it actually increases the volume in that temporarily stored area. So that's the kind of more problematic instance in the lower part of the catchment in this instance. But that bit that, you know, the pipes and the creek that convey the water to that point, it's more about what the peak flow rate is rather than the peak volume. So there's two elements to play in this one, which quite often there's not when you look at catchments.
Yeah. So with our pipes that go onto Frizz Beach that have the valves to stop the sand coming up.
There's one at Anderson Street. So the one, the issue with the one at Frizz Beach, which is the twin 900mm pipes, is the valves require a back pressure of water to open them. And because the area is so flat, we can't get enough back pressure behind the valve without causing issues to other properties. So we can't get enough pressure behind that to open the valve to go on the beach, which is why we haven't got the valves on those pipes, because that would increase the amount of pressure that needs to build up behind.
Yeah, okay.
Which is problematic. And the last few months, the sand has been basically the top of those pipes continuously. And so, you know, some years, and there's one of the residents out there who takes a photo every month and has done of that outfall for the last couple of years. And it's incredible. Sometimes, you know, both pipes are fully exposed and think, well, we're never going to have a problem there. But then within a couple of months, it could be completely up to the top of those pipes. So, you know, the dumb solution, which automatically comes to me, would be to extend those pipes into clear water, so they're not actually subject to that sand deposit, so the sand doesn't come back up into them. But what does that do for the look of the beach? You know, you've got to then, and not only that, the sand will then build up on the top side. You know, that will actually capture sand on the top side, and the beach will probably get longer, and the sand will probably go further out into the bay as well. So it is quite complex. Yeah.
That's, yeah, whatever we do in terms of Mother Nature, there's always a reaction or an unintended consequence, whatever. But anyway, I think Councillor Martin had a question, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. Is there any possibility or is there any benefit of having that water redirected to what's locally known as Muddy Creek?
We did look at that. What project was that we looked at? Oh, it might have even been in stage one of this. The issue is it's to get it across there by gravity would be a really, really deep section of pipeline. We couldn't do it as an open drain. It would be like 7 or 8 metres deep, and it would be 30 metres wide, and then try to find somewhere to cut that across. Basically cutting it from one gully across into another gully. The other way to get it water across would be to pipe that, but again, it's quite significant pipes, which would have to be 7 or 8 metres deep, is my recollection of that, which, yeah, is potentially problematic for another catchment area as well.
You also have to have easements across private property. I imagine there wouldn't, unless we go through road reserves or even tapping into the existing infrastructure though, Jonathan?
The existing infrastructure wouldn't have the capacity, yeah. So effectively, there's identified the area where there would be least cut would be just downstream a little bit of where the Portugal Main Road, Alexander Street roundabout is there. So trying to get it across fairly early up, and then it would effectively run down behind the properties, you know, the residential properties of Port Sorell, along that between there and Fleetwood. Area. Yeah.
I wonder if you could share the detail of that work that's been done in relation to the question that Councillor Martin asked. It's probably quite some time ago. If we could share that in a workshop or...
Yeah, it's certainly there. I wouldn't be able to think of it now, but yeah.
No, but the opportunity.
If money wasn't an issue, like Utopia, would that be a desirable outcome to be able to use that waterway for this excess? I mean, it's empty quite a bit. So would that be if money wasn't an issue, if all things considered, would that be a good solution?
It would be one. I guess if money is not an issue, there's probably a heap of other options that are there too in terms of pumping it out from where it wants to naturally go. So potentially not dissimilar to what we built down at the bottom end of Gilbert Street here for the flood mitigation project. So yeah, there might be a few different things come out if there was a windfall where there was plenty of money for.
It's Thursday night, 70 mil, isn't it?
It just makes me wonder, is that
Yeah, no, I understand.
solutions that we should be looking for instead of,
Strategically.
yeah.
We understand. Yeah. Just to comment on one of your comments, Jono, you referred to, I think, the bowl at the end of the catchment. Unfortunately, the bowl is actually the golf course, and as we both know, that's very impacted by flooding and stormwater, and has been for forever, basically. But yeah, it's not just a bowl; it's an actual playing golf course. So again, we'll continue to consider and work through that issue as well. Any other questions for Jono in relation to the report? Happy? Deputy Mayor Mead.
Look, it's really good to have the report, and I think it's really important we release it so that members of the community can start to analyse and understand the challenges, particularly with regard to sea level rises and other impacts in that area. I assume, is it correct in assuming that we'll continue to work with people like Hydrodynamica to keep reassessing the changes and look at other options? So we've got recommendations at the moment, but when we talk about low level detention as opposed to higher catchment detention and that impact on pressure. So you talked about needing the pressure to actually get it to effectively flow onto the beach. And the detention in the golf course doesn't help us with that because it then is a low level process to get it extracted. Are we going to continue to look at the opportunity for higher level detention? That would mean when it's released, it could actually get through quicker and create pressure as opposed to all the build up using the golf course.
So with that in mind, I'm potentially picturing a basin that's got enough, that's high enough, elevated enough with a sealed pipe that goes out to the ocean so that there's enough pressure within that to push out any sand deposits that might build on them. Is that roughly kind of...
As opposed to low level passive type system that has a significant impact on other areas.
One of the big issues that we've had, the biggest issue we had probably 15, 18 years ago with looking at that land that's on Poyston Creek, as there is this Central North Burren crayfish on the alignment of Poyston Creek. And so we did look at building a basin at the top end of the golf course, and there was two elements to that. There was the bottom part, which would be a permanent storage for irrigation, and then there was a top section that would be the buffer for the flood mitigation scenario. So that would have probably been at a height where you could have run a parallel pipe in addition to the existing open channel, and that would be able to pressurise and push out into the bay. But yeah, as I said, that wasn't part of that concept at the time, but yeah, in light of what you're saying, that would potentially lend itself to something like that. But again, the issue is the habitat in some of those areas that we've got.
Yeah, it does constrain ourselves with environmental impacts, but you look at one versus another, and it perhaps is something we could consider based on the relocation process we went through here in Latrobe.
The assessment of that 18-year-old project, or whatever time frame it was wholly, in my view, wholly considered of that project in isolation in terms of the impact on the environment. And that was on land that was owned at that stage by the Shearwater Country Club. That option is no longer available to us. The land is in private hands. But again, we've talked about what may or may not happen if and when that land is developed. But who knows? That's speculation. But that work was done, and I thought we were close to getting that dam or dams built, and the golf club put a power of work into that. They had a really well qualified person working on it, and he ended up very frustrated by the departments involved, knocking it back after, as I say, incredible amount of work and effort by the golf club and people associated with it.
Yeah, just further to my comment, I guess what's within this report, and one of the recommendations is trying to work with the golf course, and this one talks about a drainage system within the golf course, including potential deployment of pumps and things like that. So some of those other things can get explored through that process, collaboratively with the golf club. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's really important that we do. There's space there that can't be used effectively due to the impacts of the flooding or the amount of water that comes through. and doesn't get out. So I look forward to us working through this process and getting budgets in place, but also continuing to look at other options as we go through.
Anybody else? Query, question, comment? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Again, thanks, Jonathan, for all the work thus far and the work you will be undertaking in the future in relation to this matter. 14.2, the Mersey Leaving Emergency Management Plan. Again, report by Jonathan Magor. Detailed report provided. Recommendation. The report by the Manager, Infrastructure and Assets concerning Mersey Leaving Emergency Management Plan, issue 5 October 2024, be received and that the Council receive and endorse the Mersey Leaving Emergency Management Plan, so described. Mover and seconder? Deputy Mayor Mead, thank you as mover, and Councillor Fiddler as seconder. Deputy Mayor Mead.
This has been workshopped through the committee, so I'll ask Jono if he'd like to speak.
Yeah, so really the only comment is this is issue 4, so there's been a similar plan up until this point, so every 4 years it needs to be renewed and endorsed, authorised by the State Emergency Management Board. So yeah, basically it's up, so that's been renewed in line with that. What that's also done is ensures that it lines up with the Tasmanian emergency management arrangements and also the regional flood regional emergency management plan. So basically keeping everything in line with itself. What's not in this plan is a separate document which allows it to be more sort of nimble than what this plan is the risk assessment. So going together hand in hand with this is the risk assessment, but that's on the 2-year. This is done 2 years, 2 years later, the other one's done, and 2 years later, so every 4 years. This is done, and every 4 years, this is done, but it's done separately just to do the workloads and all the rest of it. But yeah, so the next part would be to go back through the risk register for the next project.
Thanks, Jono. Any queries, questions, councillors? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. 16.1 is the council workshops agenda item. Recommendation that information on topics discussed at the 16th December 2024 council workshop be received. Moved by Councillor Wicks, seconded by Councillor Fiddler. Any discussion required, Councillor Wicks?
Nothing required, only that it was a rather short list and a short workshop this time.
True. Councillor Fiddler? Happy? Councillors around the table? The motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Joe, you keep putting me off. You're raising your hand. 16.2 is the delegates' report. Information provided to councillors with appropriate recommendation. That is, the report be received and noted. Move and second if we could. Councillor Wicks, thank you. And Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Wicks.
December for you guys. For you, Mr. Mayor, but well done to find the time on that.
It was a busy month. Queries or questions, councillors? Nope. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. I think that's it. Item 20 is 16.3. Sorry, 16.3. Thank you, General Manager. 16.3. Got another page? No, got it. Council decision status report. I should have seen. The recommendation is that the December 24 status report of open council meeting decisions be received. We have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fiedler. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Metzger, thank you. Comments, Councillor Fiedler?
No, nothing from me. Everything's there in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Metzger.
Um,
On the table. Oh, sorry.
First
Deputy
of
Mayor
all,
Mead.
a comment more than a question. My goodness, this is so much easier to read, so thank you so much for the work that's going on there, and look forward to seeing some of these items move nearly at the start of this year.
Thank you. Having said that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Hopefully I'm right in going to item 20. The council go into closed session. In doing so, we'll consider the items listed. Is there a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Wicks and Councillor Martin. All those in favour? And those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And council will now consider those items in closed session. We'll have 2 or 3 minute break. Again, my apologies to those who attended either virtually or in person to hear the discussion and debate around the planning matter that was on the agenda. I trust you're not too disappointed, but I do thank you for your interest and look forward to your presence maybe in February. We'll see. Thank you. Okay.